Questions, 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 rushing into the mind of the concerned young person today. So I guess it starts for me today with the early 70s. So in the early 70s, America had the best education system pretty much in the world for a mass-based nation. Um, and this led to a lot of questioning of the establishment. So interestingly, gradually education has moved away from philosophy and history and things that get you to really question whether we're living in the ideal system or not, and towards technical training, etc. And basically, the people who control this country have separated the people from any wealth gained since then. If you look at all the research, we have had no raise as middle class or poor people since the early 70s. So that's step one. So in step two, we can say in the 80s, one of the major new direct extortions of us occurred, two of them. So one of the major extortions of us was in my opinion, the credit card industry, to separate even more money from people, because once their positions become marginal and they still want a lot of consumption, they go in debt. So now people control this company have not only taken the big slice of the cake and not distributed it, but now they're taking what the people have left and pushing them into quasi-insolvency. So then time goes by, and that's not enough. And at the same time, actually, Reagan decides to do a who can build more weapons contest with Russia to bust him. That's what I gathered from his increasing our national debt from under $1 trillion when he came into office. And then he certainly pushed it to $2 trillion by the time he left, which by present standards is modest, a doubling of the national debt in that respect, because each of us would have been paying on 2 trillion, 200 million people, 2,000, we'd each have $20,000 each, $10,000 each. So let's say at 5% interest, we'd each have to pay $500 a year interest forever to finance our national debt, or $250 a year forever for the privilege of having Reagan rule us. So then the Cold War ends, but our military spending doesn't change. We suddenly have lost the only reason to have a massive military in terms of defense, but military spending doesn't really go down. In fact, it increases markedly. So in the period from 1990 to 2000, and then beyond to the present financial crisis, those who control America, having not been satisfied with actually getting the future earnings of people as well as all their present earnings from 1970 on, where we had this tremendous rise in productivity from computers, none of which actually went to the people working and designing these computers, except of course the startup guys, which is a handful of people compared to our country. So not that it was a bad thing. So then they decided to take all our money a couple of new ways. One way is, of course, the mortgage bubble, which in theory should invalidate every mortgage contract in the country that was sold during that period, since they were all done with fraud and illegality. Of course, we're not going to let that happen. That would be a $40 trillion transfer of wealth from the wealthy to the middle class. It would cause severe repercussions to invalidate all those contracts. And with our current Supreme Court, we don't even have to worry about it. Their money is safe, regardless of the many illegalities involved in the mortgage bubble. And I participated in that bubble. I was sold a fraudulent mortgage and given false verbal assurances and failed to see exactly what could happen, where my interest rate went from 7 to 13%. My mortgage went from $4,800 to $7,500 a month. So, I saw this and researched it carefully, watched a lot of Dylan Ratigan, and so then that's not enough for them. So now what they've done essentially is pulled a lot of our wealth out of us through the housing market speculation, although it didn't really go that well for anybody yet, except a few guys that were very smart about betting short, like Goldman Sachs, which was also criminal. And then we decide to play with commodities. So commodities traditionally are market. So the farmer gets an upside that he doesn't have volatility, and the bakery giant or food conglomerate has a stability of their prices, and they both maybe lose a little bit, but they have peace of mind. So in jumps Goldman Sachs. Boom. They figure out how to game this market. So it's no longer farmer, producer, consumer. Now it's farmer, Goldman Sachs, producer, Goldman Sachs, consumer, perhaps. And let's just concentrate. And there are articles written in Rolling Stone recently about this that shows that the food price rises in the world, 35% for poor countries where people don't have money for anything other than food to begin with in some of the poorest countries. And now Goldman Sachs is taking the subsistence farmers of the third world and getting more money out of it than the producer or the farmer in terms of profit. Rich plunder for no fighting. So then that's not enough. So now they decide that they're going to take all our future money as a country forever. So they take your money because you owe them on credit cards. They take your future earnings because you owe them on a mortgage. Right? Then you don't get any raise because of globalization and employment insecurity. And we can't afford these guys that are getting double us, the government guys. Well, in fact, we could all be earning what they're earning. I'm not advocating. I think the government's incredibly wasteful and corrupt. I have no sympathy for highly paid government officials either. But the fact is we should be more upset about our lack of earnings than their excessive earnings for the rank and file. So now they do a $5 trillion job on us under Bush, where he basically takes your grandkids' money, 5 trillion of it, and gives it to people to first destroy countries where hundreds of thousands and millions of people's lives are ruined. They make money on bombing them. They make money on these contractor private armies. And then they make money on rebuilding the country in an inefficient and wasteful fashion with a hostile population, some of which are willing to immediately destroy anything we build. In the case of Iraq, Iraq had the best infrastructure in the Middle East because the Ba'ath Party, the Socialist Ba'ath Party, they had women's equal employment. There was a socialist government. They reinvested their wealth into these horrible wars with Iran, but their basic motivation was to create technocrats, technical engineers. They had a very educated population, lots of universities, a good infrastructure, and we, for some reason, obliterated all of it. So in my opinion, although socialism never really worked out, I've been looking for a place where it worked out that wasn't a parliamentary democracy like Sweden. Still don't have a good example yet. Yet, it's like we want to erase every trace of what it did, like when the Spaniards went into the Aztecs' lands and the Spaniards leveled their city so they wouldn't remember their greatness. And if you look at modern Mexicans today, you can see the loss in many cases of the knowledge of their incredible contributions to civilization, of the best foods, etc. So that's all I got for you today.